The rain had been falling since late afternoon, a heavy downpour that turned the city into a shimmering blur of lights and reflections. Every corner was slick, puddles collecting in cracks of the sidewalk, neon signs bleeding colors across the glistening streets. It was the kind of night Amelia hated, cold, wet, and unkind to anyone without a car. She was exhausted after her double shift at the diner, her apron still damp with coffee stains, her hair sticking to her forehead in messy strands. She clutched her thin coat tighter around herself, wishing she had saved enough money to buy a decent umbrella. But wishes didn't change reality, and reality was a paycheck that barely covered rent in her tiny one-room apartment with peeling paint and a window that whistled when the wind blew. She hurried down the block, the soles of her shoes slipping now and then on the wet pavement. Most of the bars along the street were alive with people, music, laughter, and the occasional burst of drunken singing spilling out as doors opened and closed. She kept her head down. Drunks could be unpredictable, and she had no desire to attract unwanted attention. Her only thought was to make it home, kick off her shoes, maybe warm some soup, and collapse into bed. That was when she noticed him. At first, she thought it was just another man stumbling out of a bar. A tall figure leaned heavily against a lamppost, head bowed, shoulders sagging, his suit darkened by the rain. People passed him by without so much as a glance, just another casualty of the night, someone else's problem. Amelia's instinct was to do the same. But then she heard a sound, faint but desperate, a low groan that carried through the rain like the cry of a wounded animal. Something in her chest tightened. She slowed her steps, torn between caution and compassion. The man shifted slightly, his knees buckling before he caught himself clumsily against the post. That was when she got a better look. Even soaked, even disheveled, he didn't look like the typical drunk. His suit was expensive, the kind of tailored fabric you only saw on wealthy men. His shoes, though splattered with mud, were polished leather. His hair was neat, slicked back, though strands now clung wetly to his forehead. He was a man out of place in this part of town. "Sir," she called softly, approaching but keeping a careful distance. The man raised his head slightly. His eyes were half closed, unfocused, bloodshot. His voice cracked, roughened by liquor. He swayed dangerously, and Amelia instinctively stepped closer, afraid he might hit the ground. She reached out, steadying him by the arm. His suit was cold and soaked through, clinging to muscle and bone beneath. He smelled of whiskey, sharp and unmistakable, but also something faintly expensive, aftershave maybe. His lips parted as if to speak again, but only a slurred mumble escaped. "Sir, you need to get out of the rain," she said, her voice firmer now. "Do you live nearby?" His hand fumbled at his pocket, clumsy fingers pulling out a wallet that slipped and fell to the ground with a wet slap. Amelia bent down to pick it up, hesitating only for a second before opening it to find some form of identification. Her eyes widened at the business card tucked inside. Embossed gold letters gleamed even in the weak glow of the streetlight. Richard Caldwell, CEO, Caldwell Hotels International. The name sent a shiver through her. She had seen it on billboards, advertisements, glossy magazines at the grocery store checkout. Caldwell hotels were symbols of luxury, towering buildings in cities she would never visit, places for people who lived lives she couldn't even imagine. And here he was, soaked to the bone, barely able to stand, collapsing against a lamppost like any other lost soul. For a moment, she considered the obvious choice: leave him. Someone like him didn't belong in her world. Helping him could complicate things. What if he accused her of stealing? What if he didn't even remember her tomorrow? But then she looked at him again. His trembling hands, his lips tinged pale, the way he shivered uncontrollably in the cold. Beneath all the wealth and power, he was just a man. A man who might not make it through the night if left there. Amelia exhaled slowly, as though releasing her last excuse. "Okay," she murmured, "let's get you out of this." It wasn't easy. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and though his body sagged heavily against her, she summoned all her strength to keep him upright. "Come on, lean on me," she urged, dragging one of his arms over her shoulders. Step by step, they moved down the slick sidewalk, her back aching under the strain, her feet slipping in puddles. More than once she nearly toppled with him, but she refused to let go. Finally, she spotted a taxi idling near the bar entrance. She half led, half dragged him to the car and banged on the window. The driver rolled it down, giving her a suspicious look. "What's this?" "He's sick," Amelia said quickly. "He needs to get home. Can you take him?" The driver frowned, eyeing the man slumped against her. "Where to?" Amelia opened the wallet again, searching until she found his driver's license. The address was on the other side of town, a wealthy neighborhood she had only ever passed through on the bus. She read it aloud. The driver shrugged. "That's far. Gonna cost." The diner smelled of frying bacon and fresh coffee, the kind of warm, greasy comfort that clung to your clothes long after you left. It was a weekday morning, quiet except for the low chatter of a few regulars and the hiss of the grill in the back. Amelia moved from table to table with her practiced smile, refilling mugs, balancing plates, pretending she wasn't still bone-tired from another long shift. Her life hadn't changed since that night in the rain. Rent was due, her shoes were still falling apart, and the $20 bill she'd given the cab driver had left her scraping by even harder than usual. Still, she didn't regret it. She rarely allowed herself to think of the stranger, Richard Caldwell. He belonged to a world she would never touch. Chances were he didn't even remember her face. She was wiping down a counter when the door jingled open. At first, she didn't notice. Customers came and went all day, each one blending into the next. But then the air shifted. The usual clatter and chatter seemed to soften, replaced by a hush of curiosity. Someone important had walked in. Amelia glanced up, cloth still in her hand. Her breath caught. It was him. Not the broken, rain-drenched figure she had dragged off the street, but a man restored. Richard Caldwell looked nothing like he had that night. His suit was flawless, charcoal gray with a silk tie, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. His hair was neatly styled, his jaw freshly shaven, his expression sharp and focused. He moved with purpose, his posture tall, his eyes scanning the diner until they landed on her. Amelia froze, the rag slipping from her fingers. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain the whole diner could hear it. He strode toward her, his presence commanding enough that every set of eyes followed him. When he reached her, he didn't waste time. "Miss," he said firmly, his voice low but clear. "We need to talk." Amelia's stomach twisted. Her mind flashed with possibilities. Maybe he thought she had stolen something. Maybe he was angry she had touched his wallet. Maybe this was a mistake altogether. She forced a nervous smile, backing slightly behind the counter. I don't know. What you mean?" she whispered. Richard's eyes softened just enough to ease her panic. "You saved me," he said, his words deliberate. "Last week, in the rain. You could have left me there, but you didn't. You made sure I got home safely, even when I didn't deserve it." The world seemed to tilt. He remembered. Amelia swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. It wasn't a big deal," she muttered. "Anyone would have done the same." "That's where you're wrong," Richard replied. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "Most people wouldn't have. In my world, people see weakness as an opportunity to take advantage. But you didn't take anything from me. You gave instead. That's rare. That's invaluable." Her chest tightened, the compliment too heavy to believe. She shook her head quickly. "I just did what I thought was right." Richard gave a faint smile, almost amused by her humility. He set his briefcase on the counter and flipped the locks with precision. From inside, he pulled out a thick, sealed folder and slid it toward her. "That's why I'm here." Amelia stared at it but didn't move. "What is this?" "Open it." Her hands shook as she unfastened the clasp and unfolded the papers inside. At first, the words blurred, legal jargon, signatures, seals. But then her eyes found the line that made her throat go dry. It was a transfer of ownership. The property listed was Caldwell Hotel, one of the smaller boutique locations downtown, but still worth millions. And beside it, her name. Amelia Hart. She blinked, sure she was misreading. I don't understand," she whispered. Richard's voice was calm, as though this was the simplest thing in the world. "Call it gratitude. Call it repayment. Call it an investment in character. Whatever you choose to call it, that hotel is yours now." Amelia's knees nearly buckled. She set the papers down quickly, her hands trembling. This has to be a mistake. I can't own a hotel. I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about business, about running something like that. Richard leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp but not unkind. You didn't know how to carry a drunk man through the rain either, but you did. You didn't know how to protect a stranger's dignity when no one else cared, but you did. You think owning a hotel is only about numbers and staff and money. No, it's about trust, leadership, doing what others won't when no one is watching. You already proved you have that. Her chest rose and fell quickly, panic warring with disbelief. But, why me? You could give this to anyone. Someone educated, someone who knows your world. Why would you give it to someone like me? Richard paused, considering her carefully. His eyes, piercing but thoughtful, held hers. Because someone like you reminds me why I started all this. Before the money, before the empire, there was a boy who had nothing. I built Caldwell Hotels because I believed in a better life. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. You reminded me. The diner was utterly silent now. Even the cook had stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, trying to eavesdrop. Amelia felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but her world had shrunk to the man standing across the counter, offering her something that felt impossible. I don't know if I can accept this, she whispered finally. Richard straightened. Then don't accept it for yourself. Accept it for what you can do with it. That hotel employs dozens of people. It serves hundreds of guests every month. It could change not just your life, but theirs. You showed me kindness when you had nothing to gain. Imagine what you could do with something to give. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, blurring the sharp edges of the contract in front of her. She had spent years clawing her way through life, paycheck to paycheck, always behind, always tired. And now this man was handing her a future she hadn't dared to dream of. It was too much. It was terrifying, but it was real. Her voice broke as she whispered, I don't even know where to start. Richard's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. Start by signing. Her hand trembled as he placed a pen in it. The whole diner seemed to hold its breath as Amelia lowered the tip to the page. For a long moment, she hesitated, the pen hovering over her name. Then, with a shaky exhale, she signed. The sound of ink scratching against paper sealed her fate. When she looked up, Richard nodded once, satisfied. He closed the folder, tucked it back into his briefcase, and fastened the locks. Then he straightened his jacket and looked at her one last time. Congratulations, Miss Hart, you're the owner of a hotel. And just like that, he turned and walked out, his presence lingering even after the bell above the door jingled shut. The diner erupted into whispers, disbelief, amazement. But Amelia hardly heard them. Her hands pressed against the counter to steady herself, her body trembling, her mind reeling. She was no longer just a waitress. No longer the girl scraping by in a run-down apartment, dreaming of a break that never came. She was something else now. Something bigger. Her whole world had shifted in the span of a single conversation. And it had all begun with a choice she made on a rainy night, when she had stopped to help a drunk stranger who everyone else had ignored.